Welcome everyone to another episode of the L2R2 PlayStation Podcast. My name's Fonze and I'm joined by my co-host, my indie game dev UK bruv from another mom, Callum Monroe. Callum, how are you?
Yeah, I'm as good as one can be with all the terrible, crazy things that are happening around us. But yeah, I'm good. I'm quite cold. I don't know if it was the same last week, but
No, last week you were complaining that it was too hot and you were whining
yeah.
there in your room.
Well, I'm always complaining, so I forget what I complain about. But now it's too cold, so it's yeah. We had like a huge heat wave for a couple of weeks. It was like proper like tropical paradise, and now it's grey and dreary and weird. So I just wish it'd be like perfect. You know, we were born on this planet. We should we should by now have evolved to just be fine with any kind of weather. But apparently,
well, I always hear that like there's places in California where it just stays like 60, 70, forever.
Yeah.
Like I've always heard. And you've traveled to California, right? I'm not sure which parts you have been to.
Yeah, I lived there for a year when I was about 10 years old. So in like Southern California, like around like the Orange County. So yeah, I'm familiar with the hot, and I mean I'm super white, so like I get burned, I pass out when it's too hot, and all this other pathetic stuff. So yeah, I'm very used to the heat over there. But yeah, I don't know how they can do it, because it is like, even when it was hot over here, I mean, like you said, I was complaining about the heat. It's like, well, at least when it's cold, you can do something about it. Like you can put on some extra layers or something. But when it's hot, you just got to sit there and just like focus on not dying. And yeah, I'm not a fan of that.
Yeah, it's tough. I do every winter, because I hate winters, and it's basically like getting to the point where I need to find a new place to go, because it's like the winters just bring me down already, like the whole depression that sets in. But I hate snow. And so I just cannot handle it anymore. And
yeah, snow's awful. Yeah,
winters are pretty bad, and so I'm just like, I'm over it, man. So if I can go to that same place you were at in Southern California, dude, I'm going there and just staying.
I don't know if you ever get like when it's at like the tail end of summer and it's starting to like get a bit cooler, like into like autumn and fall. I always think like, right, when it's winter this time, I'm gonna be really prepared. I'm gonna get loads of gloves. I'm gonna get like a nice jacket so I can stay warm. And then winter will come and I'll have done none of that, and I'm just not prepared at all. And I'm like, I've got no jumpers or sweaters or jackets or anything. So I'm just sort of like, oh no. So yeah, like already I'm thinking like it's a bit cold today. Like, oh, I'll make sure for winter I'm prepared. I'll get some like beanie hats or something. But I know I won't.
Yeah, that's what everyone does, dude. Like, or snow tires or chains, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Prepared that way. No one ever does it. Nice. Well, did you play any video games over the week?
Yeah, so as you know, I've been sort of upgrading my computer. So I've been sort of like, and I upgraded a friend's computer as well. So we've been sort of playing some things. I, as you know, finished Mass Effect 1, so I've been playing the second one.
Right.
I'm playing a bit more Gears 5, a bit more of the Halo Master Chief Collection, and on PlayStation, I've been playing quite a lot of Persona, but got back into that. It's really getting to I'm still about like 40 hours from the end, but it's like the story's really like ramped up. I think I'm getting towards the end of the original game, and then like the additional content will kick in, whatever. But so that's getting quite a bit more exciting. So I'm enjoying that a bit more. But yeah, so I've played a fair bit, to be honest.
Nice. How do you like the transition back from Mass Effect 1 to 2? Yeah, I know on Twitter you're saying it's like light years ahead already.
Oh my god, it's like, in every single way, it's like 10 times better. I'm really, really enjoying Mass Effect 2. Like, it's really, really great. I'm so glad that I played the first one so I could transition that way into the second one. I know that there are certain ways, that there's like some comic book thing you can do that will allow you to make the choices and understand the story up to that point. But I like being able to see the differences. There's still I still have quite a lot of issues with the UI. I still think it's quite like unsophisticated in a lot of ways, but it's so much better in a lot of ways. And like with the first one, you can't even play it at 1080p. You have to play it at 720 or like at these weird aspect ratios. Whereas the second one, I'm playing at like 1440p, so it looks really nice, really sharp. It just feels like a good game rather than the first one, to be honest. But yeah, so yeah, I've been enjoying that.
Do you think you need to play the first one to enjoy that franchise? Can you jump right into the second one?
I think most people could probably jump into the second one. I think for me, it's just I get really like OCD over playing previous games, just because like I think there's a certain difference between, you know, reading up like the plot of something on Wikipedia or like watching a recap video than actually experiencing it how it's meant to be experienced. So even though I didn't enjoy the majority of my time with the first game, I'm glad that I experienced the story and the characters and the lore in the way it's meant to, because now I'm playing the second one, I feel like you can really notice that where they've expanded on certain things, and you can notice the sort of similarities in certain ways as well, which is always interesting for me. But yeah, so yeah, I think I'd probably recommend to start with the second one if people haven't played them before. But I also could argue the other way around. You know, I'm happy I played the first one through, got through it, and because I'm now enjoying the second one, you know, probably more so than I would have.
Do you know? I wonder how long you expect to play. The playthrough will be for Mass Effect 2. Like, I wasn't sure how much time you actually spent with that first one, and if it's kind of increasing with each release, or if they're tightening it up.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I'll probably end up playing this one for longer, simply because the first one I think I did in about 17 hours, maybe. But I didn't. I think I said last week I didn't bother like talking to the companions very often. I ended up like just ditching the side quests because they end up getting really boring. So I think just because of how much I wasn't enjoying the general gameplay, it sort of forced me to try and get through the game as quick as possible, kind of thing. Whereas with the second one, like I'm just loving like exploring the areas, talking to everybody. Like every time I get back to the ship, which is like the main hub where you like go off from, I make sure I talk to every companion because they're all so interesting. The dialogue is great, the voice acting is amazing, and like the characters. It probably except Shepard, I think, just because he's customizable, so his animations are probably a little bit jankier. But like the aliens specifically, they all seem really like real, and so there's just a lot more like life in the game, and also there's hardly any loading screens at all. It's really easy to navigate through, which was a problem I had with the first one. Everything was just long and lethargic, so I always tried to take like the quickest route, so I would never try and explore around and try and speak to everyone, whereas this game's just a joy to do everything, so I imagine I'll end up spending more time on it because I'm just more likely to, you know, speak to more characters and explore different areas.
Nice. Yeah, it's good to see that, you know, they really changed and adjusted all those different areas of complaint for that first one. And I think that's when the second one hit. I think that's when people really considered it like, oh, this is something that's could be top 10, you know, best series ever kind of thing. Like that's what brought them into that conversation was the second and then the third one.
Yeah, I can really see that because I mean, as you know, the main thing I loved from the first game was the lore and the setting, and you know that's still done so well in the second game. It's super intriguing. The places you go to are so like there's not a stone left unturned in terms like when you read up about the place you're in on the codex or whatever, you can really like. There's just so much attention and like passion put into just everything, and it's really nice to see, and it just makes the game feel so alive, and everything feels so credible in it as well. Nice.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of anything I played this week. I played some kind of random stuff. I jumped around my PS4, and I was kind of cleaning house too on the hard drive, and it's kind of insane. Maybe just my PS4 is getting so old now, but just to load the screen that shows you how much data you have left was maybe, I don't know, a minute long of me just waiting there, just sitting to see if I can even delete anything. So that was it's just kind of showing its age. And we talked about like the UI being so sluggish too. It's like, it's time now for, you know, for an upgrade. But jumped into Crash Bandicoot, the Insane Trilogy. I never finished it, and I didn't finish it over the week, but I was just kind of chipping away more at that, and it's fun, man. It's really beautiful, and it's still not very forgiving with how difficult it is, especially like that first one. I was jumping around between the three, and that first one is just you have to precisely move, especially the side-scrolling stuff. Otherwise, you're dead. But it's still fun.
Yeah, it's a great game. I finished the first one. And for some reason I didn't carry on playing. I think it was just there were so many frustrating moments during the first one. I just didn't fancy going on to the next one. But yeah, it's a series I intend on going back to. at some point. But yeah, no, that they I think it's definitely, like left my radar a little bit when it was a really like amazing remake.
It was, and that was kind of the first kickoff to, not to remakes or anything, but just to show like they can take the bones of something, an older property, and just completely remaster it and keep the soul there. Like after that, I want to say they did Spyro, they did the there's that kart version of Crash Bandicoot as well. Is it the Nitro
and Medieval as well, which is meant to be like so faithful from a gameplay perspective that people even like sort of think that's a negative in some ways, but I think just on its own, I think that has some, is a positive in itself, just the sort of faithfulness. So but yeah, I think you're right. I think it definitely did spur on some recreations of these simpler games from that time period, because everyone's a sucker for just nice visuals and that mixed with a game that you love from sort of nostalgia. It's just a no-brainer, really.
Yeah, now these games look like we remember them playing and looking at the time, because this is how mind-blowing it was. I remember seeing Crash Bandicoot when it first came out, and it was it's just insane how beautiful it was, and now it holds up. But and then also I wanted to play just to kind of give maybe just a taste for what to expect with, because it's the same team that's working on the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater remaster as well. They did this, so I'm just kind of wanted to play this and see if there's any indication of like movement or anything. I'm just kind of looking forward. I did the same thing with when Insomniac was doing Spider-Man. I went back and played Sunset Overdrive. I was trying to trying to feel out, okay, like how do they handle movement? How's it going to transfer over? Yeah. And then I was like, oh yeah, they're gonna fucking kill it, because the movement in Sunset Overdrive is so awesome and fluid, and so they just completely took the baton and ran with it with Spider-Man. So sometimes I like to go back and just see what they've done. Yeah, definitely. And see what the heart is, and then moving forward.
I think what you can take away from in that respect, because obviously they're such different games, is that they did such a faithful job of recreating the feel of Crash Bandicoot. So you'd imagine that they're just going to keep that feel that the old Tony Hawk's Pro Skater games have. So you can sort of pretty faithfully expect the games to play as they used to, just with really nice, lovely upgraded graphics. So that's what we can hope, I suppose. But it's definitely in good hands. So I don't think we should worry, even given the sort of more recent past sort of entries or attempts of entries into that series.
Yeah, and if you look into it, like a lot of especially with the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 5, it was kind of not a cash grab, but it was them risking losing that license, and so trying to push out of the gate just an entry so they can hold on to it. And of course, they just sacrificed that franchise and threw that dev possibly under the bus, because they didn't have enough time, resources, and they said just get it done, even though it kind of ruined that series. But it is what it is. But I think that's a reality that we don't hear about. I'm sure that's the norm, is that these companies, and even with movies, you'll hear about it too, they shit out a crappy movie just because their time is running out to actually use that franchise, or they lose it goes up to be bought again by another studio, so they just kind of sacrifice it by putting something out, and it sucks.
Well, that actually reminds me of something. I don't know if you saw it's sort of related, but it's the Zoom Lord of the Rings reuniting thing. I don't know if you saw that.
I didn't watch it, but I saw that was online.
Yeah. So it's actually really. I mean, I'm like the biggest Lord of the Rings fan, so I was going to watch it regardless. But it's there's so much insight into the movies there, and there's something Peter Jackson says, which what you said reminded me. And he said, and someone asked him, how did you get the studio to agree to allow you to make such a huge project? Because I mean, all three films were filmed back to back over like 2 years. They ended up spending a lot more money on things like this, the CGI, like the mocap and all that, than expected. Because originally it was meant to be quite a low budget sort of independently made film. And Peter Jackson just said that he just kept making them spend money until they got to a point where they'd spend too much money to drop it. I suppose but I suppose in a way that's not what happens with games, because there's so many of these companies that will pour loads and loads of money into a project and then just ship it out anyway, rather than just. So I think that's. I think in Lord of the Rings case, came out the complete opposite. But I think you're right. I think there is a point where a studio will spend so much money, they're just like, well, we're so committed now, we've just got to send it.
Yeah, no, that's crazy, and that's what a great tactic to just kind of force their hand, because they want to see a return, and if they're already putting a couple $100 million, it's like, we got to see this through. But with games, they'll just go and just put it out. And I guess they'll maybe do a little bit of polish to make sure it's like playable, or you'll hear about games that are just canceled, and there has been development before, like they're in like a pre-alpha stage and it still gets canceled. I mean, these companies are still willing to lose millions of dollars, and maybe on their end they can still like take it apart and use certain systems, so it's not a total loss, and they just copy and paste this physics engine or whatever and put it in another game. But you never hear about that kind of stuff. But I wonder maybe if they have another way to salvage things that the movie industry doesn't. But I feel like they're also faster to just cancel stuff in the video game industry.
You just got to look at EA, don't you? I mean, they love to cancel projects and studios as a whole. So it's definitely a more volatile situation, I think, with games. Yeah,
you're right. You know what I also did play was the Sonic. It's not remaster, but it was like a compilation remake thing. Man, I forget that it's Sonic something, not Sonic Reloaded. It was like Sonic.
It's not Sonic. It's not that Sonic Mania game.
Sonic Mania, that's the one. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
I also had it on my hard drive, and I was running through that, and it's fun. It's really cool. Love letter to Sonic, and it's very the gameplay is exactly as you'd expect it, and they kind of redo stuff and add features and play with the soundtrack and fully flesh out the background, and it's just it's fun playing it. But it's also some of those early levels are just as hard as they were back in the day, and so it's kind of frustrating there. But I was having fun playing that.
Yeah, I've always found Sonic very frustrating. I've never sort of like understood the whole just go quick until you like hit a spike kind of like.
That's pretty much what you do.
But I did love Sonic Heroes. I don't know if you ever played that one.
I did not play that one.
That was a lot of fun. I think I had that on GameCube when it came out, and that was I've got a lot of fond memories of that game. But that's probably my only fond memories with Sonic as a franchise. I've never been too into that, but no, it's cool to hear, because Sonic Mania was one of the PlayStation Plus games, I think.
Okay, nice. Correctly. I didn't realize that.
So it's cool to hear that you're at least sort of making use of that and enjoying the offerings.
Yeah. I mean, I think I had bought it when it actually came out, but I grew up as like a Sega kid. I think one of my first consoles that was actually like my console in my room was a Sega Genesis, and so we had Sonic, and it was just blown away by the speed that you can run across the screen. But the physics were always wonky, and I guess it's just something you got used to as a kid. But it's just very much, if you're not moving, it's like you're just at a dead crawl basically until you like get your body going. But something about it, it's just the soundtrack, the art is just like burned in my brain. So even though they keep pumping out shit, I'm still like interested in that whole franchise. But
for sure.
But I've been playing that, and not a whole lot beyond that. I actually watched more shows. I don't know if you ever watched The Office, but like the American Office anyways, but Steve Carell has this new show on Netflix called Space Force.
I've seen like a thumbnail for it, but I haven't seen anything else.
It's not bad. I've been watching it, and somehow we watched the whole season, and it's actually pretty dope, pretty funny. But just watching that and kind of
nice, Yeah, I think I've been sort of like, when you've started so many different games and it like stresses you out. That's what I've been like. It sort of has been like kind of not nice, because like I'll be sat here like, oh, I could play this, I could play this, when I know I need to finish Persona. I know that I've just started all these other games and it just stresses me out so much. But so it sounds like you've got things under control, which is good. At least one of us do.
Yeah, what helps is that I sent my graphics card in, returned it, and I'm getting a new one. I want to say it's the same one that you got too. It's like the RTX 2060. I want to say is the one I got. Yeah. But so I'm excited, but I can't do anything until it comes in, because I didn't wait for the other one to get here before I sent it. I just sent mine, and then I'm just in the middle.
Yeah. No, awesome. So have you got like all your money back and everything?
Oh yeah, return just came in a couple of days ago, and then so the other one's out shipping. So we'll see. Hopefully next week at some point.
Hassle free, then that's always good. Yeah, it's a great card. I still haven't tried the ray tracing or anything on it, because I haven't got any game. I had Battlefield 5, but that was through that like some Origin access thing, which I don't have anymore. So I'll have to wait and see. But as I was saying, I've just got a 1440p monitor to try out sort of games on that resolution, and it's 144 hertz as well. It's the first time I've ever had a monitor like this, so nice. That's been pretty cool. I was playing sort of like Halo Reach at the sort of higher res at 144 FPS, and it was buttery smooth. It was very nice. So yeah, you'll enjoy that, I'm sure.
I wonder at what point, and I'm sure there's plenty of videos and stuff breaking it down, but at what point do you start to not notice the frame rate at a realistic level? Is it, because 120 frames, that's what people have been talking about with like next gen, trying to hit those levels. PC is already used to that, but like at what point does it just kind of bounce out where you don't notice it?
Well, I don't know, because I've always only ever had 60 hertz monitors, or I mean, pretty much all TVs are 60 hertz as well. So I'd say, most people, even if you get like over 100 FPS, if you've got a 60 hertz monitor, that's the maximum your monitor can even display. So most people, haven't really seen above that, me included. And when I saw 144 FPS for the first time, or over 60, I didn't think, wow, this looks so much better. I think that might be also because I've gone up to 1440p for the first time. I've never seen games at that resolution either. So I knew it looked great, but I wasn't like, God, this is such an improvement. I think it's more if you then go back to 60 frames a second, that's when you can maybe notice the stuttering. So I don't think it's like, again, I'm not one of those people who really is bothered about it. I got this monitor more because I wanted to get like the best bang for my buck out of my new graphics card. And yeah, I mean, it is, I won't lie, it is really nice and it looks great, but I still don't think it's like, you need to be over 60 FPS. Like I said, the difference wasn't noticeable necessarily. I just know it looks amazing, if that makes sense. I think where it is noticeable, it's like if you move your mouse, especially if you have it at like high sensitivity, you might not notice it, but like there are stutters just where like the frames are trying to keep up with loading what you're looking at, like, because obviously you're spinning your camera view around, so each frame's trying to load as quick as possible. Gotcha. And that's where it does like really make a difference, because it's just buttery smooth. There's no sort of hitches at all, and I think that on console it will be even better, because where you're using like a controller, it's a bit more tethered for that kind of sort of input. Right. I think that's why console games look so much, like console exclusives look so much better at say 30 FPS than a 30 FPS game would look on PC, because obviously it's like the game itself is like managed around that, so you don't really notice it as much. Like for example, when I play like Persona 5, I'll go inside from playing, I don't know, Halo or Gears 5 at like 100 FPS plus. I'll go inside and play Persona on my PS4, and I don't notice any differences at all in terms of stuttering or anything, because that game is built around that kind of the way it's meant to be shown. So I think on consoles it will probably look even better. So, but that reminds me, when the PlayStation 5 comes out, I mean, people are going to have to start buying these new monitors to even get the advantage or see the benefits. And my new monitor I got was $299 in pounds, which I think it's not a bad price, to be honest. Because people spend a lot more than that on TVs. Oh yeah. But it's still a lot of money. So I'm hoping that when the PlayStation 5 comes out and it becomes a bit more of the norm, that these monitors will start going down to like the more the 100, 200 mark that like 1080p monitors are at. So, but yeah.
Well, you bring up a good point, though, at the same time, is that these consoles are kind of, the whole point is to get them in your living rooms next to your full-blown TV, and you're using that to, like, watch media and stuff on your TV. But a lot of these newer TVs, while they keep getting cheaper and, like, bigger in size, like now 60, 70 inches is like a normal size price, TV you can get, they don't really up the features as far as, like, the hertz on that style TV. Usually they cap at 60, if that. So and I guess until that tech kind of pushes forward too, with consoles, you're not going to see that change, because you're going to be stuck to this, like, even though it's a TV you just bought, the standard isn't 60 hertz for these newer TVs. So until that changes, like people are going to get them and not experience the big push unless they're getting these special monitors that are in the PC world that people are used to getting.
Sure. Yeah, and I always think that games, even on console, look far better on a monitor anyway. I mean, when I used to, before I moved home, I used to always exclusively play my PlayStation on I'd have like this really small little 1080p monitor. But it had a really nice screen, like pretty much all monitors do. It was 60 hertz, but it's just the way the colors pop on monitors. It just looks nice. So you tend to be closer to the screen so you can really like see what's going on.
Right.
Whereas I find that when you're playing on a TV, like a big TV, you tend to be further away because obviously otherwise you're like looking around like this, and I just don't think it's quite the same. So even though that is an advantage of consoles, being able to sit in your living room and playing, I still think the best way to experience a game is on your monitor, just because you're just a lot more like involved with it. But yeah, you make a good point. It'll be interesting to see how these TVs, whether TVs change for consoles for this reason. And I don't know whether it's just me, but I've never really noticed a 1440p TV either.
No, I don't think they even bother with, because that would actually change somewhat of the dimensions, right? A lot of the TVs don't go for that widescreen format. They kind of are stuck to their normal dimensions.
Yeah, and I see a lot of like games for next gen being talked about, like, you'll be able to run it like that Unreal 5 demo, for example, that was being run at 1440p. So it has to be a valid choice to play games at 1440p. And I understand you can play games on a 4K TV at 1440p, but I just think that should be an option in terms of saving money as well, because I'm not too bothered about playing games in 4K just because it's so expensive. A 4K monitor is ridiculous money, and I'm not gonna buy a TV and play a PC on there. So yeah, I think that something should probably change slightly in how TVs are done. But again, I don't really look at TVs at the TV market, so I'm not sure whether this is already a thing or whether this has already started happening. But yeah, I think you make a good point. I think TVs need to sort of adjust with the new consoles and what they need to sort of output as well.
There's something that infuriates me, and let's see if you feel the same way. It's with TVs. Anytime you're watching something, say on Netflix or whatever. So I have a 4K TV, and I'll boot up something, and I'll get the black bars on the bottom and top.
Yeah.
And I get so fucking furious because I paid this money for those, extra 4 inches on each side, and I'm losing that. It's like, hey, just reformat it so it works.
Yeah.
But I don't want to have to. It's just so dumb to me, because I'm like, why are we doing this? I don't like it. Can we reformat it? Because I'm basically losing this real estate, and it only bothers me. My wife is like, hey, chill out. There's no reason to be so angry.
It's like The Mandalorian. I don't know if you watched that. That has huge letterbox. Like it's filmed in like such a weird way.
Right.
And like I was talking to my friend, I was like, why is it filmed like this? Like it just bothers me so much. Because like you'll forget, and then you'll realize again, and you'll be like, it seems really cut off, and he's like, because it's cinematic. It's like, but it's not. Like, why can't it just be full screen? And there's a game. I started playing Evil Within a few weeks ago, and I stopped instantly because it's got these it's got its letterbox completely, and it turns out you can turn it off, but just the fact it was just on by default infuriated me. I thought at first it was going to like turn off after a cutscene, so like, but it just stayed there, and I was like, why? Like, especially for a game, like a 3D game, they're literally limiting their camera on purpose, and it's just, I just sometimes find that like things like that are just, like you said, like it's just what, like, you pay for your bigger screens, and it's just trying to be all edgy by cutting bits off of it. I've never found the benefit.
Feel to it. It's like,
yeah, I've never found the when I played Mass Effect 1, I had these huge black boxes on the left and right, because it has to be played in a 4:3 aspect ratio.
Gotcha.
And you can have it in 16:9, but then it's all stretched, and it's just like, I definitely agree. I think it's very annoying.
You know who also did this, or just video game wise, was Red Dead 2 did the letterboxing, but that's when they would transition into like a cutscene. And so it would let the player know, okay, we're going into a
that's
cutscene.
fine. Yeah.
And then it would pull out, and that made sense. That's a fair way to do it. But like with Evil Within, to play it that entire way, I get that they're trying to go for this cinematic feel. They're trying to make you feel like you're playing a movie or something in between, but it's just not maybe it's just a creative choice, but you're just losing that real estate, then it kind of pulls you out of the atmosphere a little bit.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm sure people like it, and I don't think The Mandalorian, going back to that example, is necessarily bad, or a movie that films itself like that is bad. I do just notice it and just sort of ask why, but then I tend to forget about it. But yeah, I think with a game, when you're trying to immerse yourself into that game, I think it has to be full screen. It's just weird, and I know, like I said, you can turn it off in Evil Within, and I think they actually added that in as like a patch. I don't think you could at first, but you can turn it off. But then I'd feel like, well, am I experiencing how it's meant to be experienced, kind of thing? And
so either way, you can't find happiness.
You can't win. So I just decided to delete it and never play it instead.
There you go. We all win.
Yeah.
Oh man, Calvin. All right, so let's get into this. We got some PS5 news. Well, we had, the original idea was last week they were going to show off the PS5 on June 4th, and that changed, and so let's get into that. So Sony delays PS5 June reveal event. Jonathan Orbush of IGN has the details here. Sony has announced that it has decided to delay the PS5 reveal event, originally set for June 4th. There is an image here, a tweet from PlayStation. We have decided to postpone the PS5 event scheduled for June 4th. While we understand gamers worldwide are excited to see PS5 games, we do not feel that right now is a time for celebration, and for now we want to stand back and allow more important voices to be heard, the statement reads. Sony originally had announced last week a PlayStation 5 reveal event for the Thursday, June 4th, which would have debuted games set for Sony's next-gen console, the PS5. Since that announcement, in addition to the COVID-19 pandemic, the world is facing protests around the United States and the world have been ongoing, centering on police brutality following the death of George Floyd. This one was... It seemed like it was, of course it was the right choice, but it seemed like other companies were doing this before PlayStation as well, where it seemed like that was the direction it was going. I know throughout the week I saw that EA had canceled their Madden stream. They were talking about Madden 21. Yeah. And they canceled that before this. And so it just seemed like the right call, because the world's in an extreme state right now. And, it's kind of weird to be pushing and trying to sell toys to people when it's like, there's huge social things going on.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a great decision on Sony's part. I think this is such a monumental event, the PlayStation 5 reveal. It's going to have everybody talking about it. It's going to just take over all the news, everything. And that needs to be used for other things at the moment. There's finally like a huge uprising going on over in the States. I think it's now every single state has seen protests and everything, and it's something that needs to happen, and is finally happening, in my opinion. I think that PlayStation shouldn't, or nobody should try and detract all eyes on that, because I think that's the most important thing to focus on right now. There's a lot of voices that have wanted to and needed to be heard for so long now, and now they're finally getting heard. I think to be like, here's the PS5 would be the complete wrong thing to do. So I think it's a great decision. I think I think some, I don't think it's I don't think this is true necessarily, but I think for a lot of companies it's nice to see that they're saying similar things. But I think this in particular is something where that they know for a fact that the PlayStation 5 is going to attract so much attention. I mean, there's a handful of things that could garner so much attention at one time, and the PlayStation 5 is one of them. So I think it's this in particular is a brilliant move, and I don't think that there was really any other choice. I don't think there was any way they would have gone ahead, because I think it's just it doesn't take much of a moral sort of compass to realize that this is what needs to be talked about right now. So yeah,
I agree. I mean, and it's also, there's one like weird part of my brain where when it comes to corporations, coming out saying something positive or whatever, I always take it with a grain of salt, because they are businesses. Their goal is to sell stuff. and so I never quite like trust their motives. But so you can have say that if you will, or feel that way if you will, but even if they don't feel this way, that it's important to not promote this right now, it's also not a good business idea, because it's just going to bring them negativity if they were to try and promote and just pretend that this these huge protests aren't going on. Yeah. And so whether they care or not, it's also not a good business idea for them to do it. And I feel like that's where they kind of, that's what pushes their hand faster, is like the bottom dollar. And maybe I'm more pessimistic, and I'm not saying like there isn't real people that work, like say at Sony, at other corporations, but also what makes them change is their dollar, the bottom line. So
and unfortunately, this isn't the first time something like this has happened. Obviously, it happens all the time, and companies don't react like this normally.
Right.
So I think that this is just proof at how important it is for these, the rioting and the real the real protesting that's occurring, because yes, there's going to be certain aspects that are products of rioting that are happening, like looting and violence, that obviously are not acceptable, but that's not that's what is getting their voices heard, is that's what's actually getting this to spread to companies to do these huge supporting things that have never been done before. So we have racism, systematic racism problems in the UK. Definitely not, I don't think, to the level that the US does, but we have a lot of people, and I mean a lot of people on social media in the UK who are trying to, we call, I don't know whether you guys call it over there, but we call it whataboutism. It's like when something happens, they try and say like, oh well, what about this, and try and detract from the real thing. It's like,
it's so infuriating.
It's like lots of people are saying like, this is not the best way to do it, by rioting and looting and violence. And it's like, well, obviously you shouldn't agree with looting and violence and rioting, but happy and content communities don't riot. People don't just riot for no reason. So instead of being like, oh, there's riots, this is terrible, you should be like, well, why are they rioting in the first place? Surely the whole reason there is looting, and these idiots are using these riots to loot and be violent. Surely the whole reason that that's even happening is because of the riots happening in the first place, if that makes sense. So I think people need to, really think about what they're directing their sort of like shock at. And because it really just comes, I'm not saying that everybody who does this is doing it, purposely, but it does speak volumes when, you've said nothing and the first thing someone says is, oh, this person died because of the looting. And it's like, well, that's the first thing you've said about all of this kind of thing. So yeah, I think it is difficult, but I think the majority of people are really starting to change their views and realize that maybe this is a real issue, and something has to be said. I think I think it's great what's happening. I think whilst there are bad things happening because of it, I think it's great that there's being such an attention focused on it, and that finally everybody's had enough, kind of thing.
Yeah, no, I mean, those are the same kind of ideas and stuff that's swirling around in my head, where it's I see the same things online. Of course, don't go on Facebook, because that's where it seems like every racist piece of shit is on there. But it's the same kind of ideas, where it's like people are focusing first on the property damage and fires that are happening apparently, and not talking about like, hey, why are people having this civil unrest in the first place? And it's because there's this damage happening, it totally discredits this entire movement. And I don't agree with that at all, and it's kind of frustrating. I think you see that with this older crowd, this older generation, that think like, oh, nothing violent should ever happen to like protest something, but it's like, that's kind of there's a reason why it's been bubbling up to that point where there has been peaceful protests before. Like in America, we have this football player named Colin Kaepernick, and he was protesting by kneeling during the national anthem. This was like 2-3 years ago, whatever. And he faced this huge backlash because against people saying like, oh, this is not the time or place to do it. I want my football without any politics, blah blah blah. And so, but that was a peaceful protest. He just kneeled, and so, but that wasn't the time. Okay, cool. And now it keeps bubbling up to where you have people in the streets and people who are protesting peacefully. A whole other aspect of this too is the way the police have handled these protests. And if you've seen like it unfold on social media, it's pretty fucking nuts how it seems like just obvious, blatant like abuses of power with police departments. Where they're like shooting tear gas for no reason, or shooting rubber bullets, which also I thought rubber bullets were these tiny little guys. They're like these 40, they call them 40 millimeter rounds in the police department. Like they don't call them rubber bullets because they're like these little bullet bill things from Mario that they shoot at people. And you're also supposed to shoot them at the ground and they ricochet. They're just shooting them at point blank range. It's pretty insane, but like also the issue that's unfolding is complex, right? So it's like you move one way, you kind of have to talk about how it splinters with the conversation that way. It's not just like, oh, somebody got their property damaged, this is bad. It's like there's a lot of things happening and moving parts that but require someone to be able to think about it and not just like blatantly go, oh, this is bad, this is good.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I mean, rioting is not good. It's not a good thing. It's bad, and nobody should riot. And looting is abhorrent and should never happen. And violence in general should never happen. But rioting, like I said, it doesn't happen for no reason. People riot when they're angry. And looting and violence is a product of rioting. People, there are absolute scumbags everywhere, all over the world, and they will use these riots to loot and to destroy people's livelihoods and everything, and that is awful. But these riots are happening for a reason. There's a reason that these people are able to use these riots to loot and to cause violence there, and that reason is that innocent people are being killed on the streets by the people who are meant to protect them. And it's that's where the anger should be directed, and like, again, like I said, whilst it is awful that people are looting and people's livelihoods are being taken and people have even died from the riots, whilst that is awful, you need to look at the reason people are rioting in the first place, because none of this horrible stuff would have happened had these riots not started in the first place, and these riots wouldn't have started in the first place if the majority of the government weren't completely racist. So to put it bluntly.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I mean, they kind of sneakily will say things in certain ways, but it's like we all know what's going on. We just can't. There's no direct. I wish there was some honesty, at least on their end, saying like, "Yeah, we just don't like you guys." All right,
exactly.
See you later. Something like that.
That's all they have to do is come out and say, "Yeah, there is a huge corruption and racism problem in our police," and I mean, whether or not it is like black and white. I don't mean that, no pun intended, as in black and white obvious a race thing with the police, or whether it's just a complete abuse of power as well. There's clearly an issue there, and they just have to address that. To me, I mean, I get that might not be enough to some people, but they have to just at least address that there is complete corruption in the system, that black people are treated completely differently, and that there's huge social and economical problems that need to be mended and changed and handled differently as well. And until they do that, something needs to be done. So people are gonna have their voices be heard, and if that's by burning down, police stations and burning down targets and these things, then that's how it's gonna have to be until there's a change.
Yeah, I agree. I know when this was unfolding and like reaching the fever pitch, last week, me and my wife were talking about this, where it's like you wish that the police departments were taking charge and being like, hey, this recent murder doesn't represent us. These asshole cops out there don't represent us. We're with you. We're going to charge them. They're out of here. Like, I wish they were kind of showing that more progressive approach. But by being silent and not doing that at all, and then coming out in droves against protesters, it seems like they're creating this us versus them narrative.
Exactly, yeah.
Where if you could squash that by showing the community that you're with them, you're on their side. But it's instead, I think it's just when you give people power, they don't want to let go of it, and they abuse it because people are people. So with the police department, they're coming out in like full SWAT team gear, and it's just kind of, it's unnecessary. And I get that it's complicated because the police want to protect themselves. It's a dangerous job. Like, I get it. That's where this conversation gets complicated. Being a police officer is a dangerous job. They have to be sent out and deal with the worst types of people who are actually committing crimes. And so their nerves are always at 11. Yeah. I get that. But maybe we need to rethink that whole structure and try and make sure they get the right training, they get the
Sure.
right psych evaluations, they get time
Yeah.
off, they get, there's other things that need to be done,
Yeah.
and it's like that needs to be part of the conversation. I don't know, it's tough because there's I don't
Yeah.
know if you've seen online, there's also a movement of like a hashtag that's all cops are bad, or also we need to get rid of cops completely. I just don't know how that works if you do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
I think that's just, every single movement has extremism, and I think that is just where this movement is showing that side of it. And
gotcha.
I think that you just have to identify that and realize that that it's because things start to lose the point, and to sort of eradicate cops is not the point of this at all.
Right.
Not from how I look at it anyway. And I think you're right. I think they just get given way too much power. I mean, they're armed to the teeth with all these guns, and the fact that they know that, I mean, most of these cops had 20 plus complaints against them. They know they're not going to be punished.
Right.
And like you said, and I completely agree, a lot of these cops are thrown into really dangerous areas where, like you said, their nerves are going to be heightened, and it's some places are like war zones, I'm sure. But in this particular case, there was that he was unarmed. There was no danger to the policeman's life. He didn't none of the police even had anything drawn. There was no weapons drawn. And he knelt on his neck for 9 minutes, and then if you look at all these videos from the protests, you see police just charging down unarmed people, attacking them. I mean, in the UK, like I said, we definitely have a problem with black people being searched more often or being pulled over more often, things like that. But at least our police don't abuse their power in terms of being forceful. I mean, you'd never see, our British police are very much, if they're attacked, they can't do anything really about it except, restrain or anything. And it even goes to our other power positions, like bouncers, for example. So nightclub bouncers, they're never allowed to throw a punch or anything. It's very controlled in that respect. That from my perspective in the UK anyway, like I said, there are definitely problems in how people are brought up and how people are taught certain things, but there is just such a corruption in power in America from what I can see, and that is just so obvious to anybody looking in on the outside. Even looking, because there's all the footage online of all the police being extremely violent to the protesters, even the peaceful protesters. But even if a protester is not being peaceful and he's unarmed, why does a policeman have to use force? You know what I mean?
Right.
It's just maddening. And even if people say, oh, this is taken out of context, you're just taking the footage of the police that are doing this, but it's but that shouldn't be that footage shouldn't exist at all. It doesn't matter if it's a supercut of police being violent, and then there's lots of other footage of protesters being violent. We know the protesters are going to be assholes, are going to be violent, are going to be horrible people. It's the police that shouldn't be that. You shouldn't be a police officer if you're going to be a horrible person. I'm sure there are hundreds, if not thousands, of disgusting, abhorrent people in these protests that are throwing bricks and destroying property and hurting people. But that's life, we have people like that. We have thugs and hooligans in this world, but the police should not ever be like that. They should not be a police officer if they're going to act in that way. They have to be taught and trained to be controlled, and because otherwise they shouldn't be a police officer. They should be part of the in the crowds of the rioters looting things, because that's where their morals are more suited.
Yeah, it's no, it's exactly right. There needs to be more accountability with police. I mean, and that's a fair thing to ask of a police department. It's because you've been given this power, you've shown that you can't be trusted with it. Okay, we need to dial that back. There's unions that protect police to the point where they can just kind of move to another department if they get enough complaints. They never really get fired and go away. They're just able to exist. So there's too many cracks in that system. So making sure that is removed, so where you're not protecting piece of shit cops to keep going. You need to support that. I feel like the police should on their end be willing to support that kind of change, because it's going to only improve the visuals on the police department as a whole. I mean, from the community standpoint to how they view their police, it's all things that should be no-brainers, but there's this huge resist from police departments thinking that they're I don't know, their way of life is going away, or their ability to enforce things the way they want to is going away. They've shown that they can be trusted with that power, though. It's like, if you wanted to keep this power, you should have been willing to see the writing on the wall. Also, with these protests, you'd think that at the protests of people, they're in line to protest against police brutality, you think they could not beat the shit out of people there
exactly,
protest, but they still do it there. And they know they're recorded. The world is recording them, and they're still not changing. It's like, okay, then maybe they're proving to us they can't be trusted with this level of power, at least as a whole. I'm sure there are great. I've had conversations with great police officers, but as a whole, there needs to be something done, and you can still, in my mind, you can still support police and still support this change that needs to happen within the actual ranks.
Yeah. All I know that is in the UK, if an armed police officer fires his weapon at somebody, then he is not allowed to carry a weapon ever again. That he's off of the armed forces, and he gets given like loads of the armed unit of the police, and he gets given lots of sort of time off and all of this stuff. And I'm sure there are awful people in the police, in the UK, but it's how those police are trained. They're trained to not use force unless absolutely necessary. They're trained in all these different ways, so that where the racism is still there, it still exists, is in those police choosing to pull over black people more often, choosing to stop black people in the streets more often, to search them, because that's not you can't really train people to not do that, if that makes sense. That's just down to their own outlook on life, which is not a good thing at all. But so that's where I think in America is where the corruption really lies. It's in these higher ups who are employing these officers and training them. They should be scared to. I know if I was a policeman in the UK, if I punched somebody as a police officer, even if that person was a criminal and everything, I would be terrified to lose my job, because that's how it's seen in the UK. In America, these police officers are punching, beating people down, completely unarmed, sometimes not even necessarily a criminal, and obviously in the cases that have spurred all this, killing people. They're getting away with it. So there's just no higher up. There's no what's the word? Like, there's just no
accountability, or
there's no accountability from their superiors who are training them. There's nobody who are in the police who are like, right, this needs to stop. We need to completely change how we train our officers. We shouldn't be doing this. It's just, and like I said, I mean, people are gonna, till the cows come home, say, yeah, but you're just getting footage of police officers being violent. You're just getting all these specific footage. There should be no footage of police being violent. There should be not a single piece of footage at all of a policeman being violent, because if they're going to be violent, they shouldn't be a policeman. It's the same with a bouncer for a nightclub. If a bouncer at a nightclub's going to punch someone in the face, then he shouldn't be a bouncer at a nightclub. You could say if anything, if you're going to swear or curse at somebody, you shouldn't work at a restaurant. If you're going to, it's just like, it's simple stuff. If you're going to be violent, you're not a police officer. So that's why I don't buy the whole, these clips are taken out of context. A police officer should not ever be violent unless they have to like defend themselves or whatever.
Yeah, that's just, we need to hold them to a higher standard. The higher standard that they demand, they should also demand that within themselves in their own ranks. There's a couple of I forget the comedian, but he had these really great comparisons where within the airline industry with pilots, if they have any issues with pilots, they remove them. Like if you have like American Airlines, they can't say like, oh, most of our pilots like to land. It's like, no, they all need to, like, that's how it needs to work. They all need to be. And then if you have anyone like a doctor who has any kind of malpractice stuff against them, they get rid of them. It's like, and their lives are on the line. And same with police. It's like the lives are on the line. They're able to decide with impunity, what happens. And so if they're going to keep that level, which I don't think they probably should, but if they're going to keep that ability, they need to show that they can handle that responsibility. They're showing that they can't. So I think they need to roll that back. At the very least, get rid of the militarization that's within the police, the full-blown weapons. I know one aspect of this whole thing is the fact that we're dealing with Corona, with COVID-19 right now. And one of the big issues in the States was that a lot of medical professionals couldn't get like the proper gas masks, the proper outfits, and it was
Yeah.
a whole deal. And then you cut to these protests happening, and 2-3 days later, there's police in full riot gear, just ready for a full-blown war. It's like, where do they had this funding, but like medical professionals don't. So there's this weird imbalance of just the priorities aren't straight. And I think people within the police have this like cowboy or military fantasy of, you know, fighting this enemy, but it's its own citizens. It's like, well, we don't have our priorities straight, and that's why you see the civil unrest and people needing to say something. It's frustrating, but because you'll see people that want to deny this entire movement, and I just don't know what's going on in their brain if they're just refusing to look at everything and just kind of want life to proceed how that benefits them.
I mean, I could go on about it for forever, really, because there's so much to be angry about and to rant about. But I think like the last thing I'll say is, you know, the Second Amendment in America, I think that's the one which allows you to carry a weapon. You know, that's there in case the government ever become tyrannical. That's why that amendment exists, and the government are being quite tyrannical, I think. So
although it's kind of funny because you'll see that there's a certain type of community that really supports the Second Amendment, like to the cows come home, they're not willing to budge at all. But that community is not supporting the fact that the government is basically using this force against them. It's this huge divide where it's like those same dudes who are going to walk around with the AR-15s in the NRA, they're going to pretend that the police and government aren't doing what they're doing right now, and it's very strange to have this divide.
Well, that's the thing. I think if you're pro-gun, which I think, you know, I'm not here to, like, you know, I can vehemently tell you racism's bad and everything that's happening in America is bad with the police, but you know, I'd say that there's interesting arguments for both sides of gun laws, you know, looking at it from the outside. But yeah, like you said, if you're pro-gun, if you're on that side of the fence, you should be like completely telling everyone, you know, the government are being tyrannical. This is why we are allowed weapons.
Right.
You know, I'm not enticing like a full civil war, but you know, that's what is written in the amendments of America. So I don't know. It's a hard one. It's, you know, like I said, in the UK we have a similar. I'm sure we have lots of violent police, but I just know that it's a lot less heard of in terms of like violence like that. And yeah, I think that it's clearly a problem, and people are starting to protest in the UK now. Like I know in London that lots of war memorials were vandalized and everything, which again is awful, and I don't agree with that, but you know, what's the reason why they were there in the first place? You know, it's what's much worse than some spray paint on some old statues is black people being killed in America. So
yeah, I was going to ask you too, since you're in the UK, I don't get to talk to very many people, you know, that have your perspective, but with the police, what are they allowed to have on them as far as like how they enforce laws? Do they have like a physical, like a baton thing, a mace? What are they, and then like are weapons reserved for certain level officers, or how does that work?
Well, I'll put it this way. Whenever somebody sees a policeman with a weapon, they mention it. So they're like, oh, he's got a gun. Like that policeman over there's got a gun. I mean, in London, like especially around, like especially when we have like things like, you know, the terror attacks that we've had sort of over the years in London, then armed police force is, you know, a lot more visible. So, and I mean, in London, like around Downing Street where the Prime Minister is, there's, you know, policemen with like Heckler and Koch, so like MP5 submachine guns and things like that. But I mean, those are a different kind of police anyway. They're proper armed like police. But yeah, it's very, we don't hear of any, you know, guns or anything, especially not where I mean, I've got to admit, you know, I'm in the south of England, so but even like close cities to me, like Southampton, Bournemouth, Portsmouth, like these bigger cities, you know, you don't hear of police firing weapons. It's definitely an anomaly. I know that up in like bigger cities like Manchester and London, I think there is still a fair amount of gun crime, but it's mostly knife crime in the UK. We have a real problem with that. But also our police are like underfunded, like hugely. So it's not necessarily the police aren't doing their job, it's that there's not enough of them to do their job as well. But yeah, in terms of how armed are the police over here, not very at all. Our police are, like I said, very well trained to take down people, you know, using unlethal force like tasers if need be. stun guns. I mean, every single video you see online, I mean, sometimes you'll see like awful videos of police doing the wrong thing, but the worst thing they'll do is tase somebody. That's
Gotcha.
like literally the worst thing you'll see is somebody might get wrongfully tased, which again is a bad thing, but I'd rather somebody get wrongfully tased, locked up in a cell and then let out the next day, rather than someone get wrongfully shot and killed and you know, their family never get to see them again. So I'm not in any way saying that the UK police is perfect. There's definitely some problems there, but there's a huge divide in how much power is given to them and how they're trained as well.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think there's a really good argument for proper, if we're going to remove weapons and the ability to use that to like enforce laws, there's a good argument for proper MMA training, proper martial arts training with like how to subdue a person, how to safely do that, where you can bring them to the ground and they're subdued, they're controlled, their body movements are controlled. And not like this guy with the Goerge Floyd situation where he put his fucking knee on someone's neck. That's not a jiu-jitsu move. No one does that. It's insane, right? So, but if our police had training on how to subdue a person, there's a way to do that where they're not physically. I mean, it hurts to be like in a strangle and a chokehold kind of thing, but you're also, or a submission move rather. But you're not going to die from that if you have proper training.
You'll wake up with a bruise around your neck, maybe, and you might feel a bit foggy, but you're alive and you're going to see your family again.
And there's also, when you train that kind of stuff, there's a respect you gain by realizing you can get your ass kicked or you can get choked out. Like when you realize that, you're a bit more conscious of how it feels. And it kind of weeds out the assholes a little bit. I know with like the jiu-jitsu community, there's a lot of that because you do get choked. You do have another man's weight on you. You understand just how real it is. And so you carry that with you. And not only how you roll with other people, but like in all aspects of life, you kind of are checked a little bit. And so it would check some of these assholes that are able to feel like, oh, I'm untouchable. I could never get hurt, get my ass kicked. It's like, no, you get your ass kicked all the time in these gyms so that you are brought down a little bit.
And you also understand how much damage you can do. I mean, when you start martial arts, you realize that you can't throw a punch to save your life. You can't do all this. But after a few years, you realize that you really could do some damage if you wanted to. And I mean, added on with the fact that from that that somebody could also do damage to you very, very easily. It doesn't give you more power over people, but it lets you just understand, like, this could really hurt somebody. I don't want to ever have to, hurt somebody the same way, maybe you've been hurt by training in martial arts or whatever. But it definitely gives you some insight in that, and it calms you down. I think you're right. I mean, again, it's the same with becoming a bouncer. To become a bouncer in the UK, you need to have some martial arts experience and some training, because obviously those people are constantly dealing with not just violent people, but drunk violent people who are not going to stand a chance anyway against a normal person because they can't see properly. So I mean, it's even more important to be a bouncer to make sure that you're not just going to get some hot-headed idiot who's going to punch someone and very easily. I mean, you can so easily kill somebody just by punching them. They'll fall, hit their head on concrete.
Exactly.
So I think you're right. I think if America can't control the amount of times violence has to be used, then at least teach the person who's using that violence to control it themselves.
Yeah, it's tough, and these are things that while the civil unrest is happening now, I feel like there's a lot more years up ahead of the slow change before we get to where we see the results. And I hope that's not the case, but like I think before you really see a whole system-wide change, it takes time. But in the meantime, we could use this by getting rid of people that should not have that position and bringing enough attention to this. We're also in a crucial time right now with Corona later on everything else, people unemployed, but also in America, we're in this election year. So it's going to get real nuts because these next couple of months are going to determine, how things go. And then also the trials for these 4 police officers. If we thought, riots and protests were bad now, if these guys get off like other police officers have before, it's not going to be good at all.
No. Yeah, and rightly so as well. If they get off, then burn everything down.
And it might be the case. It's like it's going to prove that this system is corrupt from the inside out. It's like, and something has to change. And it's very interesting right now. obviously it's not like something that quickly happened. Like this has been something that there's systemic racism in America that's been here from the get-go. It's just like quickly the world has reacted to it in a way that hasn't happened before. So it does seem like it's been within these 2 weeks we're really kind of like taking this on as the next thing, when before it was a lot of corona stuff, and now it's like we're really trying to handle this because it's civil unrest. You want to make sure that this. But I would say also the president that we have has not been handling it at all. I mean, this is the time where we need someone with the poise, the ability to have a conversation, to quell fears that a president needs to have. He doesn't have that. Say somebody like an Obama who can speak eloquently, who can conversate. This is not the guy, and we have the worst person in power for this kind of thing right now.
Yeah, for sure.
It sucks, man. It sucks. I don't know. It's not gonna get any better, but I mean, we'll see how it goes. And stuff has been postponed. That was, the whole segue into this was that we have the PS5 postponed. Some of the things that they did push off was Cyberpunk 2077 had their stream. I want to say next week. They delayed that. COD Modern Warfare or the Warzone had an update. They delayed that. Fortnite as well had a thing. They delayed that. It's just it's just not the right time, I guess, to really promote this stuff, and it's hard to get people on board when these are toys and it's more important things in life that are going on.
Sure.
I guess to do a horrible segue, these are more things that aren't important, but it's some PS5 news that we can talk about. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. But hey, we'll talk about it. But just some more information on like how PlayStation is tackling backwards compatibility. This is a PlayStation boss not interested in making PS4 versions of PS5 games. Matt Purslow of IGN has the details. PlayStation CEO Jim Ryan is uninterested in making PS5 games run on PS4 hardware, stating that developers working on next-generation games should make the most of the new console's advanced features. Talking to GamesIndustry.biz, Ryan said, "We believe that when you go to all the trouble of creating a next-gen console, that it should include features and benefits that the previous generation does not include. And then in our view, people should make games that can make most of those features. We do believe in generations, and whether it's the DualSense controller, whether it's the 3D audio, whether it's multiple ways that the SSD can be used," he said, "we are thinking that it's time to give the PlayStation community something new, something different that can really only be enjoyed on PS5. The article goes into the fact that we have new features like the SSD, the haptic feedback controller. How do you feel about backwards compatibility? Is it a deal breaker for you to not have that with the PS4 to PS5?
So I think it's a deal breaker to make sure that PS4 games, at very, very least, I mean, really I think it'd be cool to have every single like PS1, PS2, PS3 and PS4 games all playable on PS5. But in terms of backwards compatibility, in terms of a PS5 game being scaled down for the PS4, I completely agree. I don't think they should do that. I think a PS5 game should be focused on PS5. It shouldn't be scaled back or limited so that it can come out on the PS4 as well. I think, like he says, they have to take advantage of all the new tech. They have to take advantage of everything so these games can become the best possible versions they can. But also having to scale things back like that and make sure things work as well as they can on PS5, but also on PS4, it's going to be a massive pain in the ass for the developers as well. So, I absolutely agree with him. I think that PlayStation 4 games PlayStation 5 games shouldn't be scaled back to work on PS4 at all.
Yeah, I think it's going to be there's a reality where you might not physically be able to with the SSD stuff. That's a huge new undertaking, and it's going to be incredibly hard to just make that go back and forth. I mean, these games are made to work on these super fast SSDs, and they just can't rely on the old school way of doing it. So that makes sense, and that's kind of what I want. I want to just kind of have a next gen experience with the PS5. But and that doesn't relate to backwards compatibility. You can still have PS4 presence there on PS5.
Yeah, I think if you're going to spend likely to be like $500 on this new machine, you want it to be $500 worth of like improvement.
Right.
You're spending $500 for a completely new console that's going to replace your PS4. I don't want to then play a game that could have been better, but the reason it's not is because they want it to also work on the console that you've just replaced for $500. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's I think they need to go all in. PS5 games should be PS5 games. I think where games, are coming out on PS5 and there's going to be a bit of overlap, then fair enough. Those games are probably already being developed on PS4 anyway, so a PS5 would just be an enhancement. But if you're creating a game now starting a game's development now and it never was intended to be on PS4 anyway, then yeah, they have to go all in, and they have to, like talking about the DualSense and the 3D audio and the SSD, they need to make the most of all of that.
Yep, I agree. So we got some other PS4 news here, or PS5 news rather. Report, new PS4 games must be compatible with PS5 in the future. This is Joe Screbbles of IGN. Sony has reportedly told developers that PS4 games submitted for certification from July 13th onwards must be forwards compatible with the PS5. PS4 versions of The Last of Us 2 and Ghost of Tsushima will also apparently be compatible with PS5. Per report from Eurogamer, developer documentation on Sony's internal partner website now includes a step that must be checked, saying that the game has been tested for compatibility with PS5. The compatibility apparently means that PS4's game code must run without issues on a PS5, and the game must include all the same features. Sony is also seemingly strongly recommending that any patch or remaster for a game submitted before July 13th would allow for PS5 compatibility. Any patch for a game submitted after that cutoff must ensure the game remains compatible with PS5. There's a difference between submission and release. Games are submitted for certification well before release, so some games arriving after that cutoff date could still be non-compatible with the PS5. However, Eurogamer also reports that it has heard The Last of Us 2 and Ghost of Tsushima, Sony's final major PS4 exclusives, and neither of which will have hit that cutoff point, will be supported on PS5. Yeah, Callum, I'll throw it to you. What do you make of this? Is it important to have these games still, compatible? Or are they just ensuring that when you buy a disc on, in this next year, it's going to work on that PS5?
It's sweet and sour, because I think it's great that, these games are definitely going to be compatible with the PS5, because again, that needs to be a thing. But this also sounds like a lot of PS4 games aren't going to be compatible with the PS5, because what about games that are before that?
Right.
You want, with how Xbox has been doing their backwards compatibility, you'd expect this brand new machine to be able to play PS4 games, and so yeah, I don't know. That's a little bit worrying, I think, in that respect. But it's also, in a way, good to know that Last of Us 2 and Ghost of Tsushima are definitely going to be playable on the PS5. But yeah, I don't know. I think that sounds quite a little bit worrying in terms of backwards compatibility as a whole on PS5.
Yeah. It seems like Sony has also kind of had this more reluctant, approach to backwards compatibility and bringing that stuff to the PlayStation ecosystem. But I wonder, does this only affect the disc version of it? Is it the same for software? Because it seems like it's easier to emulate if it's just software, but I don't know. My knowledge of that breaks down, but yeah, we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, it's a weird one. I just really hope that PS3 games will be backwards compatible as well, without me having to stream them, because I don't like streaming games. I'd rather play them downloaded or even buy a disc. I mean, I did recently buy a PS3, so it's not that much of a big deal, but it'd just be nice to have a proper like legacy console kind of thing attached to the PS5. But I mean, either way, I'm excited to play new games as well. So yeah, it's a weird one. I just think that it's kind of like unacceptable to not match really important advancements that Xbox are already doing now. I think that's a bit of a problem.
Because now Xbox is able to use that tagline that the PS or the Xbox Series X will have thousands of games at launch, because they'll have that entire library. And Sony can't say that. So at the very least, you need to be able to compete on that same level. And it doesn't seem like they're doing that.
Yeah.
Nice. So this one you had posted today. I want to get your thoughts on it. This is The Outer Worlds looks terrible on Switch. So Ethan Gatch of Kotaku has some of the details here. The Outer Worlds, did I say Outer Wilds? Yeah, okay. Outer Worlds looks so bad on Switch, I'm tempted to tell even people who have no other means of playing it to stay away. The Switch port of Obsidian's sci-fi role-playing game by Virtuos Games comes out June 5th, and it's clear the journey to Nintendo's handheld home console hybrid has been anything but smooth. From the couple hours I've played so far, the underlying game still appears to be intact. The look and style of the original, meanwhile, has taken a severe hit, with characters, objects, environments that look at best blurry and at worst incomplete. Though bleak, this satire of life on the space frontier is offset in part by a vibrant-looking world and gorgeous skyboxes that make the Outer Worlds feel more like space fantasy than just a gritty dystopia. Unfortunately, a lot of that beauty and detail is missing from the Switch port. More than once I caught myself waiting for textures and other graphical details to load, only to realize they weren't coming. This is just how the game how things were going to look. Callum, you had some, pretty vocal thoughts. At first glance, I saw some of the images. It looked like, it's just kind of a weird Switch game. But then as you look closer, it does look really bad.
Yeah. I saw this earlier. I think it was the Kotaku article. I saw just like the thumbnail of it on Twitter. And I thought when I saw that, I wasn't sure if it was real or whether Twitter was like compressing the quality. But, I said then, if this is real, then this is unacceptable to charge people. I think it's £45 at the moment on the Nintendo Store.
Yeah.
That is just completely unacceptable. I don't know how they can... And I watched a video somebody shared as well on Twitter just of gameplay on Switch, and it is just horrific. It is absolutely... I can't say I've ever seen a game that has taken such a hit before. It's literally like if you went on a game on your computer and put everything onto very low, like every single graphical setting possible onto the very, very lowest, that looks worse than that. It's ridiculous, and the problem is people aren't going to do the research. They're going to know that The Outer Worlds is meant to be a good game. They're going to pay £45, download this, and just see this. You can't even read the signs. Like, I saw a couple of bits where they'd go up to like one of the signs that are like by the town, and you can't even read what it says on it because it's so blurred out. It's not acceptable at all. And I think on another point as well, it just shows that the Switch, whilst I do like the Switch, I just think it's only good for its exclusives, because multi-platform games, it's just not powerful enough to keep up at all. And it came out after the PS4 and Xbox, which is weird.
Now, it's funny though, it seemed like the Switch was able to keep up somewhat with a lot of these PC ports. Like, it was able to handle Doom, Wolfenstein, even the Witcher. Somehow they got it working on their butt, albeit with like everything basically graphically turned down. But now we're really seeing where it's having a hard time with this. It already wasn't powerful hardware to begin with, but now we're in the third year of the Switch. Yeah, it's really struggling. And so how is it going to keep up with these ports that I imagine people are going to keep porting it, because these games do sell well on Switch, but they're going to hit this bottleneck where they just can't compete anymore. They can't provide the same experience anymore.
Yeah. And I think with the Switch as well, I think it blew its load a bit early as well, because you had like Breath of the Wild, Mario Odyssey, Smash Bros, all these like huge Nintendo games that were console sellers, but now they don't have anything. They just had Animal Crossing, which is obviously sold like ridiculous amounts.
That one was huge,
But now, like, the sort of gap between Animal Crossing and whatever the other exclusive that had last come out on Nintendo was a big gap. I have no idea what they've got in plan after Animal Crossing that's going to be big again. I just don't know. I just don't think Nintendo quite have the best optics, because obviously they're trading in power to rest on their IPs. And whilst the Switch has sold really well and it's done well, there's some good games on it, and I think it's a great console, I think this kind of thing here, paired with the fact that they're relying on their old IP so much, it doesn't look good for their future. I can't imagine what they could possibly release to compete with next gen hardware, because there's only so many times that people are gonna go out and buy a new Zelda game, a new Mario game, and there's only so many times that there's gonna be like, because I don't know if you'd agree, but because I've played Zelda Breath of the Wild, I've played Mario Odyssey, I think they're good games. I don't think they're anywhere near as good as they're made out to be, and I think that's just a general Nintendo thing. Breath of the Wild in particular, that got like a 97 on Metacritic or something absurd, and I just don't know how. I really just don't understand how it gets so highly rated. Because when you actually play it, there's really nothing there that's groundbreaking. It has a system in it where your weapon breaks after like 5 hits, which I just think is like objectively terrible. So I don't know. I think Nintendo's strange. I think it's definitely living off of this like really like strange love that critics have for its original IPs. And yeah, I think the cracks are starting to show now. And like I said, I just think optically they don't really have much of a future from what it looks like, because they also haven't even hacked network play yet properly. So
yeah, they're still in the just stone age.
They're still in the PS2 days in terms of their network capabilities.
Yeah, it's tough. And maybe and sacrifice isn't the right word, but maybe they threw those huge tentpole games early enough to try and get those sales for the Switch, try to get that early adoption rate with like Zelda and Mario.
Yeah.
But then you lose those huge games that people would be waiting for, later on in the life of the Switch. But I guess the kind of out of left field somewhat success is Animal Crossing gets sold incredible amounts.
Yeah.
And so that gives them more time to figure it out. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think we do disagree. I really loved Zelda, and I didn't at first, but it clicked with me, and I just had a blast. I love that world, the mechanics. I even loved Odyssey too. I thought that maybe my favorite Mario game ever. But also they're relying heavily on the nostalgia with Mario Odyssey. Like the reason why it's so special is because it's built on 25 whatever years of Mario stuff, and it's all within that. So there is something there for sure that I could see from an outside perspective, where it's a little bit of that nostalgia is what's keeping it going. But I think maybe the strength with Switch is not relying on these ports and just trying to get custom made games that can take advantage, like whether you like Zelda or not, or Odyssey or not. Those are games ran really well, look really beautiful, and they kind of understood what that Switch could handle hardware wise, and they tailored it. And so maybe you rely less on these PC ports because it just can't handle these games anymore, like console ports. It can't handle them unless you're making a custom made. And maybe these devs will now start considering a custom made version based on the Switch hardware, because there's so much Switches out there in the wild. Maybe they'll actually consider it. But like a full-on port, it's going to be really tough to keep doing that.
Yeah, because don't get me wrong. I mean, I think, again, I love the Switch, and I think it's a great console, and I think lots of games are arguably better on it, especially like smaller indie games, and just like games like Dead Cells and things like that, I think would probably be best on Switch. And there's some Nintendo first-party games like Octopath Traveler, which I love. Pokemon obviously is a big fan favorite as well, but I just think I just kind of am starting to think, and this isn't really related with the Outer Worlds. I mean, this is just sort of like brought on the topic of conversation, but I just don't know what they can do to keep that up. I think they just need to do something different, because yes, it might be a great place to play indie games. There might be some really nice little cute games on there but that's not going to help them if they release another console or whatever, because I can't envision them releasing their next console to compete with whatever is coming, whether that be in I'm sure it probably wouldn't be for another like 3 or 4 years, but I just can't imagine people then see it being like, oh, there's another Zelda, another Mario, another Animal Crossing, another this, and having the same amount of excitement. So I don't know. I mean, I could definitely be wrong. I just think, I think they might have burned through their IPs, and they're just relying way too heavily on them. Because, I mean, those games have been going on for so long that there's just got to be a point where people are just like, I've played these. I've played all of these games, and I just want something new from Nintendo for once.
Yeah, that's fair. And at least they're trying to, extend the life by having these other third-party games. But something else has to change, and I think we need a hardware revision if they're going to try and really compete going forward. We're seeing this next-gen release next year, or the end of this year, so they're really going to have to keep up with that. There was rumors for a while of some kind of Switch Pro. That was along with like the Switch Lite rumors, and the Switch Lite became a reality. So maybe we see a Switch Pro or some kind of only docked thing. I don't know, but I imagine they gotta have rumblings around in the company for what their future is, and so that would be the key, is having the next level of Switch that can handle these other games as we go forward.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think that'd be a good idea. I don't know. It's just a very strange ecosystem for me. I've never been huge into Nintendo, so there might be a slight bias. I loved the GameCube. I think, to be honest, the GameCube is the only Nintendo console I know of that actually was as powerful as its competitors.
That was the last. Yep, I think you're right. I think that was the last time they're trying to go 1-for-1 with the competitors.
And I loved the GameCube. I still think the GameCube controller is the best controller that money can buy today.
That's an extreme statement there, Cal.
Yeah, I love that controller. I even bought for my little brother's got a Switch and he loves it, and I bought him for his birthday the like GameCube controller that you can buy for the Switch.
Yeah.
Just so I could feel it, and it definitely feels not as good as I remember, but you know, back when I played on the GameCube, I remember thinking then like this controller is just the nicest thing. But yeah, I don't know. It's a weird one. I just can't see Nintendo really competing anymore in terms of power. So, and I'm not saying that's the only way they can compete, but I just think that they need to invest more money into original IPs. You know, just get something new. I mean, we've seen Zelda, we've seen Mario, we've seen it all 1,000 million times. I just don't know how much longer they can rely on those like, I mean, really ancient IPs in terms of games. I mean, Mario's like NES, well, both Mario and Zelda are both NES days. So I think it's just time for something new. I'd love to see something new. I'd love to see something colourful like those games, but just something completely different. But we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, exactly. We'll wait and see. All right, Callum. Well, that's it for this week. We'll end it there. Where can they find you on the internet?
On Twitter at Bear Munro. Also, I should probably talk about my game studio, which is Catan_games, I think, on Twitter as well. Yeah, that's about it. It's quite boring on there, but you know, if you fancy it, that's where I am.
Nice. And yeah, you can keep up with us as well on Plastic Heart Pod on Twitter as well. That's it for us this week. We will see you guys next week. Bye bye.
See you later.
You're too late. I've already summoned Meteor.
Okay, let's go.